My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call that story your capital S story. And today, on this episode, and several more to come, we are turning the tables, and I am surrendering my host mic to my talented and super smart colleague, Tara D'Orazio, and she is going to be the host. Tara, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. How does it feel to be the one answering the questions instead of asking them?
This seat just got a lot hotter, Tara.
That's right, exactly. This is a new series on the podcast we're calling Chapters with Paul. And it will give us a chance to sit with the chief storyteller here at WordWrite and hear some of the science and thinking behind WordWrite's trademarked story crafting process, what it means and what it can do for your business. Today's episode is about social media and storytelling.
Never heard of it.
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
So people have been telling stories for a long time.
Yes.
They either were writing them down, telling them in a group of friends. Now we can go in a little box, we can write whatever we want, we can share it with the whole world. How has social media changed the face of storytelling?
Well, in so many ways, obviously. In some ways, that's an obvious question, and in a lot of ways, it's a question that it's hard to understand, so it's really good that we're talking about it, Tara. Social media can be an immersive experience, and that is one way that it has definitely changed storytelling. Sometimes for the better and sometimes not. Please do not consume TikTok videos while driving your car. That is dangerous.
That's right.
And I will tell you that because some of those are pretty damn funny and pretty darn engaging, it's successful storytelling, but not meant to be done while you're multitasking.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, so much content is coming at us because of social media. It's never been more important to be sharing a clear, concise, well-crafted story in order to have success.
Exactly. And do you think that it's just as powerful, because you can create it so quickly, because it's so readily available to write whatever you want? Is there still power in sharing your story on social media for, businesses today?
So that's a great question. And there's two parts to that answer. Yes, the immediacy of social media is one of its great benefits. It can also be, for people who are uncomfortable with social media, one of their biggest concerns. And as you and I know, Tara, because we do this for a living sometimes, you can pre-plan your social media. And actually, a lot of the best stories shared on social media, it's not a matter of just pushing the button on the phone and blasting it out there. Now, sometimes that's great storytelling, and it's appropriate to do that. But a lot of times, you can give as much care to your story on social media as you would in any other medium, and in fact, that's probably a good idea.
Exactly. But there's this instant gratification, feeling that comes to us. So we can post a story or a photo and we can get a like right away, and we get that validation right away. And sometimes does that skew really, hey, was this really that great or not? Because we're just kind of looking for the likes and the comments. We're not thinking about maybe the long term of the post or whatever it might be.
Such a great point, Tara. And yes, that is absolutely true. So much research has been done primarily around the issue of young people, teenagers, pre-teenagers being on social media. that's one issue, but what we know from that research is how the brain interacts with social media. And what you just said is so true. It is easy sometimes to get likes or interaction on videos that may not necessarily be sharing a good story, may not even be remembered, but they're feeding that dopamine center in your brain and causing you to have immediate gratification.
Right. So what should brands do to ensure that they're being relatable to audiences and still maybe using some of the fun things that are out there with socials, but also telling their story, their capital S story?
That's a great question. For sure, you should be using the tools that are available on social media. And I'm talking about filters, audio, editing tools that are available on the different platforms, but don't go crazy with them. The story is still the thing. If it serves the story, it's worth using the tools, but you can't lose the story in the tools.
Exactly. Now, sometimes it's easy to quickly post something because you think it's a good idea in the moment. It's also not something you have to think about too hard to post something on socials. Tell me a little bit about ensuring that your content isn't being seen as controversial or overly emotional or not, there's all these things that can be foreseen with content. How can you make it so that you're really putting out there what is important to your business?
I think there's two answers to that question. It's good to have guidelines in the moment of what you're really just going to put out right away. It's going to vary from person to person. If I'm an MMA fighter, what is okay for me to put out on social media for my fans in the moment is going to be one thing. If I'm Heinz Ketchup or some big consumer products brand that folks have certain expectations of, then my guidelines for in the moment social storytelling should be different. Then the second thing is, when we have disputes with people in life, and I think of a quote from Mark Twain, that there's nothing you can't say about somebody you dislike and put it in a letter and not mail it, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes discretion is the better part of valor in social media. You may capture what you think is a great story, but if you have concerns about it, it doesn't mean you have to put it out there right away, because as we know, Tara, a lot of our crisis work that's related to social media comes from folks putting things on social media that later on they wish they hadn't.
Exactly. And as you said, if you're an individual and you're sharing your own social media story, your own story in general on social, that's different than
Yes.
a company that has thousands of employees and a lot of companies, and we do that work here, have put guidelines in place for their social media, but there are a lot of companies who don't have those written.
Yes.
So what would be your advice to companies as far as how do you control, or can you control, what your employees post?
So some things you can't control, but you should absolutely. Any organization that has more than 2 employees ought to have social media guidelines. We worked with a company earlier this year, just confidential, so I'm just going to give you the outlines, but in the United States and around the world in the last year or so, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been a big deal. And we had an organization that we worked with where it was not really an employee, it was a contractor. Regardless, they were associated with the business. Took a very strong stand one way or another on social media. That person drew a lot of flack on social media for their views on social media. And guess what else happened? They came after the business. Mm-hmm. So you do have to be aware of this.
Exactly. So a lot of people might think, well, I can only share some things on social. I can't really share complex ideas. It has to be something I'm thinking of in the moment or a photo I took. Can complex stories be told on social, and what are the right platforms for that, or what has been your experience in that?
The answer is yes. You can tell complex stories. Many platforms will work for you. In the old days, it was blogs, and then it was Twitter, now X, and you can still use Twitter and X for that. YouTube. TikTok is a little bit different because of the way the algorithm works. You can't guarantee that, let's say you create a serial of a story. It's going to have 3 or 4 chapters or something. You can't guarantee that if people see chapter 1, that they're going to see 2, 3, and 4. Or you can do that on most other platforms. And actually, that's a very old way. That's how Charles Dickens in the 1800s got his start. Before he was writing books, he was writing serialized stories that were published by the newspapers of the day in London. And that still works on social media.
Yeah, I think it also gives people something to look forward to. If you say this month
Absolutely.
we're covering this, it just gives people the opportunity to come back and see what you're up to and if they're interested in it and really engage and follow you more than just, oh, I liked this one post or this. It's kind of long-term engagement, which is what we're all looking for on the
And if
socials.
I can add to that real quickly, Tara, as you know, because you do a lot of this work here at WordWrite, working with influencers will build a brand and a following. And in essence, what's happening is people are coming back to them for serialized content. An influencer will have an area of focus. Maybe they're a young mom, so a lot of their content is focused on their kids and things their kids need, or their family, right? And so maybe they're not always saying this is part one of a 10-part series, but in fact what they are doing is living their brand by over and over again plumbing the same issues.
Exactly. And that kind of leads me into what is the future, do you think? And, influencers was a great, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we weren't thinking about influencers the same as we are now. What are some of the things that you see coming up, maybe even with AI? How will all of this intersect with social media? What should we be looking out for?
Well, I think that's a great question. Folks, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back and we're going to dig into AI because, boy, I guess, Tara, we could do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, we probably will.
Couldn't we? Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with Storylines Live.
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
All right, welcome back. So, Paul, we were chatting about future of social media and potentially how AI could play a role.
Right, and as it affects stories.
Yeah.
AI is definitely going to be a great boon for storytellers in many different ways. One way that it should not be is it should not be the author of your stories.
Right.
Now, I know it's tempting and in some ways easy for this to happen. I will tell you from personal experience, it's not a good idea. We were working on something here at WordWrite in the last week, and we needed to have a press release put together. Now, this was not for a client, it was for something we were doing for WordWrite as part of an organization that we belong to. And I was on my way out the door, and I asked ChatGPT to summarize the press release into a LinkedIn post, right? And then I put it in Word and I edited it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I made a LinkedIn post.
Right.
Do you know that LinkedIn flagged my account
Oh.
and said that it detected AI content? Now, folks, I'm a writer, so I guarantee you I did not just copy and paste and put the content on social media.
Right.
And by the way, LinkedIn is great for what it is, right, Tara?
Mm-hmm.
It is not TikTok. It is not on the bleeding edge of what's going on in social media. So if a platform like LinkedIn, which could be maybe considered not an early adopter, a late adopter in a lot of ways of things on social media, is got its antenna up looking for AI content, we all need to be aware of this, because again, I went through this thing and edited it, and I do not know what it saw that caused it to do what it did. Thankfully, I am still on LinkedIn and everything's working fine. But that's a cautionary tale from somebody who's a pro at this for people who are watching this and are not as deeply involved in it as we are.
Exactly. So things to think about are just know what you're doing when it comes to AI. Everything that you're putting into those is probably being stored somewhere, we know, so be careful if you have, client information or things that aren't public, that you're putting into something like that. And obviously these platforms are trying to be transparent with if people are using AI content. So while it's good, it could also, when you're doing it for how you were doing it, which was a normal way to use it, it's, wasn't allowing you to do that. Any final thoughts on social media and storytelling that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, social media and storytelling go together, not like Nutter Butter, but like peanut butter and jelly, maybe,
That's right.
I do think that they are both beneficial to each other. Social media without storytelling is just something you're going to scroll by and not remember. Right. Storytelling with social media is a story that's got components to it that you can't get anywhere else. So they really are made for each other.
Exactly. Well, thanks for doing this, Paul. If you want more information about what we do here at WordWrite, especially with respect to storytelling and our story crafting process, you can visit us at wordwriteagency.com. You'll find links to all of our socials there as well, so be sure to follow us as we share our capital S story, and we would love to learn more about yours.
And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. See you next time.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.